Rome's most famous legion. The Lost Legion. What happened to Legio IX Hispana? For more than 100 years, the Ninth Legion marched wherever Rome demanded. It crossed frozen rivers, climbed mountains, stormed fortified cities, survived civil wars, conquered distant lands. Its soldiers fought beneath the eagle of Rome from the final days of the Republic to the height of the empire. Generation after generation of legionaries wore the same symbol upon their standards. They believed they belonged to one of the greatest military units in the Roman world. Then, without warning, the Ninth Legion vanished. Not in a glorious final battle remembered by every Roman historian. Not in an epic last stand celebrated by poets. It simply disappeared. Its name stopped appearing in official records. Its commanders faded into silence. Its eagle was never mentioned again. For nearly 2,000 years, historians have asked the same question. What happened to Legio IX Hispana? Was it destroyed in Britain? Did it perish somewhere in the East? Or did one of Rome's greatest legions quietly disappear without anyone realizing its story would become one of history's greatest military mysteries? Rome's war machine. To understand why the disappearance of the Ninth Legion remains so extraordinary, we first need to understand what a Roman legion actually was. A legion was far more than a group of soldiers. It was a permanent military institution. A family. A community. A symbol of Rome itself. A full-strength imperial legion usually contained around 5,000 heavily armed infantry, supported by engineers, medics, craftsmen, surveyors, and administrative officers. Every legion carried its own traditions, its own battle honors, its own proud history. Some existed for centuries. When a legion achieved victory, its reputation grew stronger. When it suffered defeat, Rome remembered. Losing an entire legion was almost unimaginable. Especially one as famous as the Ninth. The birth of the Ninth. The exact origins of Legio IX remain uncertain. Like many Roman legions raised during the final years of the Republic, its earliest history is difficult to reconstruct with complete confidence. Most historians believe the legion was raised during the 1st century BC, probably during the turbulent years when Rome was torn apart by civil wars. One man soon became closely connected with its story. Julius Caesar. By the late 50s BC, Caesar commanded several experienced legions during his campaigns in Gaul. Although the surviving evidence does not answer every question about the Ninth's earliest service, the legion became firmly associated with Caesar's army and the brutal wars that expanded Roman power across Western Europe. For nearly a decade, the soldiers fought almost without rest. Dense forests, mountain fortresses, frozen rivers, hostile tribes. Every campaign hardened the legion. By the time Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BC, many of his veterans had already spent years fighting together. Their loyalty became legendary. The wars that made Rome. The Gallic Wars transformed Rome forever. Caesar defeated powerful tribal confederations led by men like Vercingetorix. Entire regions fell under Roman control. The Republic gained enormous wealth. The Ninth Legion marched through some of the hardest campaigns of that conquest. Ancient writers describe soldiers constructing bridges across mighty rivers in days. Building enormous siege works. Marching incredible distances. Fighting in conditions that pushed human endurance to its limits. Victory did not come easily. Thousands of Romans died. Yet the legion survived. Every campaign added another chapter to its growing reputation. It became known as a dependable fighting force. Exactly the kind of legion Rome trusted with its most difficult missions. Civil War. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon, Rome entered civil war. Romans now fought Romans. The Ninth Legion once again stood beside Caesar. At battles across Italy, Greece, and beyond, the legion helped defeat forces loyal to Pompey the Great. These campaigns differed from the wars in Gaul. The enemy wore Roman armor, used Roman tactics, carried Roman standards. Victory often came at terrible cost. Yet once again, the ninth endured. When Caesar emerged victorious, the legion shared in his success. Its soldiers had helped reshape Roman history. But peace would not last. From republic to empire. Following Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Rome descended into another period of violence. Civil wars erupted once again. Eventually, Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, later known as Augustus, defeated all rivals and became Rome's first emperor. The Republic was gone. The empire had begun. Many veteran legions remained in service. Among them, the ninth. Rather than disbanding this experienced force, Augustus continued using it to secure Rome's expanding frontiers. The empire needed reliable soldiers. The ninth had already proven itself. Why Hispana? At some point during its long service, the legion acquired the title Hispana. Exactly why remains uncertain. Most historians believe the honorific reflected distinguished service in Hispania, the Roman name for the Iberian Peninsula. The title became part of the legion's identity. From then onward, it was known as Legio IX Hispana. Roman legions often earned such names after important campaigns or long periods stationed in particular provinces. These titles became badges of honor. They reminded every soldier of the victories achieved by those who had marched before them. A young recruit joining the ninth inherited more than armor and weapons. He inherited a century of tradition. A new frontier. By the 1st century AD, Rome's attention turned toward one final island beyond the northern sea. Britain. Julius Caesar had invaded twice but never conquered it. Now Emperor Claudius intended to finish what Caesar had begun. In AD 43, a massive Roman invasion crossed the English Channel. Among the invading forces stood the Ninth Legion. Britain presented entirely new challenges. Dense forests. Marshes. Unpredictable weather. Powerful Celtic tribes. Unlike Gaul, much of Britain remained unknown to Roman commanders. The campaign would last for decades. Once again, the ninth found itself at the edge of the known world. Blood and mud. The conquest of Britain proved far more difficult than many Romans expected. The legion fought across rivers, forests, and hills against determined tribal warriors who knew the landscape far better than any invader. Roman discipline usually prevailed. But victories often came at a heavy price. One of the most devastating moments arrived during the revolt of Boudica in AD 60 or 61. When Queen Boudica led a massive uprising against Roman rule, the Ninth Legion attempted to stop her advance. The result was disastrous. Ancient historian Tacitus records that much of the legion's infantry was destroyed. Only the cavalry managed to escape. For many armies, such losses would have meant the end. The ninth survived. Fresh recruits arrived. The ranks filled once more. Its eagle continued flying. Its story continued. Or so everyone believed. York. Eventually, the ninth established its base at Eboracum, modern-day York. From there, the legion guarded northern Britain. It built roads, fortifications, bridges, military headquarters, altars. Its soldiers helped transform a distant frontier into part of the Roman world. Archaeologists have uncovered inscriptions, tools, weapons, and buildings connected with the legion's presence in York. For decades, this seemed to be the home of Legio IX Hispana. Then, the evidence simply stopped. No dramatic final battle. No official announcement. No inscription explaining its fate. Only silence. The last record. Around the early 2nd century AD, the Ninth Legion appears in inscriptions from York. Then, nothing. Its name disappears from Britain's historical record. Later Roman documents listing active legions no longer mention Legio IX Hispana. Somewhere between those records, one of Rome's most famous military units vanished. Did it march north and never return? Was it transferred elsewhere? Did an unknown disaster erase thousands of soldiers from history? No Roman historian tells us. No surviving document provides the answer. Only questions remain. Questions that archaeologists, historians, and military experts are still trying to answer today. As winter winds swept across the walls of Eboracum, the soldiers of the Ninth continued their duties, unaware that future generations would remember them not for a famous victory, but for a mystery. A mystery that would survive long after the Roman Empire itself had fallen. In the next chapter, we follow the legion's final known movements and uncover why so many believed it met its end in the wild lands beyond Roman Britain. The last known march. The Lost Legion, what happened to Legio IX Hispana? By the beginning of the 2nd century AD, the 9th Legion had become one of Rome's most experienced military units. For decades, its soldiers had fought across Britain. They had survived rebellions, built forts, guarded roads, expanded Roman territory farther north than many believed possible. To the people of Britain, the Eagle of the Ninth had become a familiar sight. To Rome, it was simply another reliable legion protecting the frontier. Nothing suggested its story was about to disappear into one of history's greatest mysteries. Britain was never truly conquered. When modern people think about Roman Britain, they often imagine a peaceful province filled with roads, villas, and prosperous towns. The reality was very different. Roman control reached only as far as Roman soldiers could enforce it. Beyond the frontier lived powerful tribal societies that had no intention of accepting Roman rule. Northern Britain was especially dangerous. Dense forests covered much of the landscape. Rugged hills and mountains made movement slow. Heavy rain turned roads into mud. Small Roman patrols could disappear without warning. Unlike large set-piece battles, the fighting here often consisted of ambushes, raids, and sudden attacks. The enemy rarely stood still. They struck quickly, then vanished back into the wilderness. The northern tribes. Ancient Roman writers described the peoples beyond their northern frontier as fierce and unpredictable. Although later tradition often associates these regions with the Picts, historians note that the political landscape of northern Britain in the early 2nd century AD was complex, and the term Pict became common in Roman sources only later. To Roman soldiers, however, these northern tribes shared several advantages. They knew every valley, every river crossing, every hidden forest path. They needed no maps. The Romans, despite all their engineering skill, remained strangers in this land. Every campaign farther north became more difficult than the last. Victory no longer depended only on discipline. It depended on understanding a country that refused to be conquered. York, the last certain home. For years, Eboracum, modern-day York, served as the headquarters of the 9th Legion. From here, officers planned campaigns. Engineers built roads leading north. Supply wagons departed almost every day. Thousands of soldiers trained inside the fortress walls. Archaeologists have uncovered workshops, barracks, inscriptions, and military equipment confirming the legion's presence there. One inscription, dating to around AD 108, records construction work carried out by the 9th. It is one of the last secure pieces of evidence placing the legion in Britain. After that, the trail begins to fade. The silence begins. Historians often describe silence as one of the greatest challenges in ancient history. Sometimes, what is missing tells us as much as what survives. After the early 2nd century, inscriptions mentioning Legio IX Hispana in Britain disappear. No official record explains why. No historian writes that the legion was destroyed. No emperor boasts about replacing it. It is simply gone. For generations, this silence led historians toward one dramatic conclusion. The legion must have been annihilated. But where? And by whom? The theory that captured the world's imagination. For much of the 19th and early 20th centuries, many scholars believed they had found the answer. The Ninth Legion, they argued, had marched north into hostile territory. Somewhere beyond the Roman frontier. It was overwhelmed. Perhaps surrounded in dense forests. Perhaps destroyed during a massive tribal uprising. Every soldier killed. Its eagle captured. Its name erased forever. The theory seemed convincing. After all, Britain had already witnessed disasters like the revolt of Boudica. Why couldn't another catastrophe have claimed an entire legion? The idea captured the public imagination. It inspired novels, films, documentaries. The image of thousands of Roman soldiers disappearing into the misty wilderness became one of history's greatest legends. But legends and evidence are not always the same thing. Hadrian arrives. In AD 122, Emperor Hadrian personally visited Britain. He quickly recognized what generations of commanders had already learned. Conquering all of Britain would demand enormous resources. Holding it might prove impossible. Instead of pushing farther north, Hadrian chose a different strategy. He built a wall. Stretching approximately 73 miles across northern Britain, Hadrian's Wall became one of Rome's greatest engineering achievements. It marked not only a frontier, but a change in Roman policy. The empire would defend what it already possessed rather than endlessly expanding into hostile territory. Some historians once believed Hadrian ordered the wall because the Ninth Legion had recently been destroyed. It sounded logical. A devastating defeat followed by a defensive strategy. Yet no surviving ancient source actually makes this connection. The missing legion. As Hadrian's wall rose across the landscape, something unusual happened. Another legion appeared in York. Legio VI Victrix. Transferred from the Rhine frontier, it took over the fortress previously occupied by the Ninth. Why? Did it simply replace a legion that had been moved elsewhere? Or was it filling the gap left by one that no longer existed? The evidence refused to provide a clear answer. Ancient history often works this way. One new discovery solves a mystery, only to create another. A story everyone believed. For decades, the theory of the Ninth's destruction in Britain became accepted almost as fact. History books repeated it. Teachers taught it. Novelists transformed it into unforgettable stories. Perhaps the most famous was The Eagle of the Ninth, published in 1954. The novel imagined a young Roman officer searching for the lost eagle of his father's legion somewhere beyond Hadrian's Wall. Millions of readers encountered the mystery through fiction. Over time, many people began believing the story reflected historical fact. But archaeology was about to change everything. A discovery across the sea. In the 20th century, archaeologists working in Nijmegen, in the modern Netherlands, uncovered something extraordinary. Stamped building tiles. Military inscriptions. Evidence connected to Legio IX Hispana. The discoveries appeared to date from a period after the legion's last confirmed appearance in Britain. If that dating is correct, it means the Ninth could not have been destroyed in northern Britain. It had left the island. Suddenly, the most famous explanation for the mystery no longer seemed secure. If the legion survived Britain, where had it gone? The mystery had not been solved. It had become even deeper. A new investigation begins. Historians now faced an entirely different problem. The Ninth Legion had not simply vanished in Britain. At least, perhaps not. Instead, it seemed to have crossed the North Sea. But after the evidence from Nijmegen, the trail disappeared once again. No more inscriptions. No official record of its destruction. No list explaining its final assignment. The legion emerged briefly from the shadows, only to vanish all over again. In our next chapter, We'll examine every major theory proposed by modern historians, from campaigns along the Rhine to wars against Parthia and the possibility that the ninth met its end thousands of miles from Britain. The answers are far more surprising than the legend most people know. What really happened to Legio IX Hispana? The Lost Legion, what happened to Legio IX Hispana? For nearly a century, historians believed they knew the answer. The Ninth Legion had marched into northern Britain and never returned. It was a dramatic story. A perfect story. A legendary Roman legion swallowed by the wilderness beyond the frontier. But history rarely follows perfect stories. Because when archaeologists uncovered evidence suggesting the Ninth may have survived its service in Britain, everything changed. The mystery was no longer where the legion had disappeared. The mystery became when. And perhaps even more importantly, why? The evidence from Nijmegen. The discovery that changed everything came from the Roman city of Nijmegen, in what is now the Netherlands. Archaeologists uncovered stamped roof tiles and inscriptions connected to Legio IX Hispana. These were not random objects. Roman legions marked building materials with their own official stamps. It was a practical way to identify military construction projects. If these finds truly belonged to the Ninth after its departure from Britain, then one conclusion followed naturally. The legion had crossed the North Sea. It was still alive. This single discovery forced historians to reconsider decades of accepted theory. Perhaps the Ninth had never been destroyed in Britain at all. But archaeology also created a new problem. After Nijmegen, the evidence vanished again. Theory 1, destroyed in the East. Today, one of the most widely discussed possibilities is that the Ninth Legion was transferred to Rome's eastern frontier. The East was becoming increasingly dangerous. The Roman Empire faced powerful enemies there. Chief among them was the Parthian Empire. Unlike many of Rome's previous opponents, Parthia had repeatedly demonstrated that it could defeat Roman armies. The disaster at Carrhae had already proved that. Later emperors continued campaigning in the region. Legions were constantly moved wherever they were needed most. Could the Ninth have been one of them? Some historians believe so. If transferred east, the legion may have taken part in Emperor Trajan's Parthian campaigns in the early 2nd century AD. Those campaigns were difficult. Supply lines stretched across vast distances. Cities changed hands repeatedly. Disease spread through military camps. Any legion could suffer catastrophic losses. Yet no surviving source specifically names the Ninth. The theory remains possible, but unproven. Theory 2, the Jewish Revolt. Another possibility places the Ninth in Judea. In AD 132, one of the greatest uprisings against Roman rule erupted. The Bar Kokhba Revolt. The rebellion proved far more dangerous than Rome expected. Entire Roman units suffered heavy casualties. The fighting lasted for years. Ancient historians describe the war as one of the bloodiest conflicts of Emperor Hadrian's reign. Some researchers have suggested that the Ninth may have participated, and perhaps been destroyed, during this brutal campaign. Again, there is no direct evidence. No inscription. No surviving military report. Only circumstantial possibilities. The theory fits the timeline. But history demands more than possibility. It demands proof. And proof has never been found. Theory 3, quietly disbanded. Perhaps the most surprising explanation is also one of the simplest. What if the Ninth Legion was never destroyed at all? Roman legions occasionally disappeared without dramatic endings. Units that suffered repeated losses could be reorganized. Merged with other formations. Renamed. Or quietly disbanded. This happened for several reasons. Heavy casualties. Political decisions. Military reforms. If a legion's reputation had been badly damaged, Rome sometimes preferred to remove its name rather than celebrate its failures. Could this have happened to the Ninth? Some historians believe it could. The absence of dramatic historical accounts may actually support this possibility. After all, ancient writers often loved describing spectacular disasters. Silence sometimes suggests something far less dramatic. Theory 4, lost in an unknown war. There is another possibility. Perhaps the ninth was destroyed. But not in a famous campaign. The Roman Empire fought dozens of smaller wars that barely appear in surviving historical records. Frontier uprisings. Raids. Local rebellions. Expeditions into poorly documented regions. Entire campaigns have disappeared because the documents describing them simply did not survive. If the ninth met its end during one of these forgotten conflicts, history may never recover the details. Thousands of Roman soldiers could have died. And all written evidence might have vanished over the centuries. This possibility reminds us how much of the ancient world has been permanently lost. Why the records end? One of the greatest frustrations for historians is that Roman records are incomplete. We often imagine the Roman Empire carefully documenting everything. The reality is very different. Official archives were destroyed by wars. Libraries burned. Papyrus decayed. Political upheaval erased countless documents. What survives today represents only a tiny fraction of what once existed. Many military reports have disappeared forever. Many inscriptions remain buried beneath modern cities. Many answers may simply no longer exist. The mystery of the ninth survives not because historians have ignored it, but because history itself is incomplete. Separating fact from fiction. The disappearance of the Ninth Legion has inspired countless books, films, and television programs. Many present dramatic stories as historical fact. Some depict the Legion being wiped out by mysterious tribes in northern Britain. Others invent secret missions beyond Hadrian's Wall. These stories are entertaining. But they remain fiction. The historical evidence tells a different story. We know the ninth existed. We know it served in Britain. We know it likely appeared later in Nijmegen. After that, the trail grows cold. Everything beyond those facts enters the world of informed speculation. Good history requires knowing the difference. The missing eagle. Every Roman legion carried its sacred eagle. The Aquila. It symbolized the legion's honor. If the eagle was lost, the shame was immense. Curiously, no ancient writer records the recovery, or loss, of the ninth legion's eagle. If the legion had been annihilated in a famous battle, we might expect some mention of its standard. Instead, nothing. No triumph celebrating its recovery. No emperor boasting of avenging its destruction. Only silence. That silence has become one of the strongest pieces of evidence that whatever happened to the ninth may have been more complicated than a single catastrophic battle. The mystery deepens. The deeper historians investigate, the more complex the story becomes. Every archaeological discovery answers one question while raising two more. Every inscription offers another clue. Yet none provides the final piece of the puzzle. Perhaps that final clue still lies buried beneath a Roman fort somewhere in Europe or the Middle East. Perhaps it was destroyed centuries ago. Perhaps we will never know. History sometimes leaves us with mysteries that cannot be solved completely. And the disappearance of Legio IX Hispana remains one of the greatest of them. As the centuries passed, emperors came and went. New legions replaced old ones. Rome continued expanding, fighting, and building its empire. But somewhere, the story of the ninth quietly disappeared. Not with a triumphant ending. Not with a glorious defeat. Simply into history's shadows. In our final chapter, we'll explore why this mystery still captivates millions of people today, what modern historians believe is the most likely explanation, and why the legend of the Lost Legion may endure forever, even if the truth is never fully uncovered. The legend that refused to die. The Lost Legion, what happened to Legio IX Hispana? Nearly 2,000 years have passed since the Ninth Legion was last mentioned in the historical record. Empires have risen. Kingdoms have fallen. Entire civilizations have disappeared. Yet one simple question continues to fascinate historians, archaeologists, writers, and millions of people around the world. What happened to Legio IX Hispana? Most ancient mysteries eventually find answers. A forgotten inscription. A buried tomb. A newly discovered manuscript. Some missing piece finally appears. But the Ninth Legion has refused to surrender its secret. Every new discovery seems only to deepen the mystery. Searching for answers. Modern archaeology has transformed our understanding of the Roman world. Satellite imagery reveals forgotten forts hidden beneath farmland. Ground-penetrating radar uncovers buried streets without disturbing the soil. Tiny fragments of pottery can identify entire military units. Coins reveal where armies marched. Even discarded roof tiles stamped with a legion's name can change decades of historical thinking. Yet despite all this technology, no discovery has answered the question everyone wants solved. There is no inscription reading, "Here the Ninth Legion fell." No battlefield unquestionably linked to its destruction. No emperor proudly recording its final campaign. The silence remains. What historians believe today? Most modern historians agree on one important point. The old story that the Ninth Legion was destroyed in northern Britain is no longer considered the most likely explanation. The archaeological evidence from Nijmegen strongly suggests that at least part of the legion was present on the European continent after its last secure appearance in Britain. Beyond that, opinions begin to differ. Some scholars argue the legion probably moved east and disappeared during one of Rome's difficult wars against Parthia or in another frontier campaign. Others believe it may have been quietly disbanded after suffering heavy losses. A few still argue that the evidence from Nijmegen does not necessarily represent the entire legion. The truth is that none of these theories can be proven with certainty. And that is exactly what makes this story so remarkable. Why Rome never explained it? This raises another fascinating question. If the Ninth Legion really disappeared, why didn't the Romans tell us what happened? The answer may lie in the nature of Roman history itself. Ancient historians rarely attempted to preserve every military detail. They wrote about emperors, politics, civil wars, major victories. Countless frontier campaigns received only brief mentions, or none at all. A legion transferred from one province to another might leave only a handful of inscriptions behind. If it later disappeared during a poorly documented conflict, the official explanation may simply never have survived. History is not a complete record. It is what time allowed us to keep. The power of a mystery. Perhaps the greatest reason the Ninth Legion continues to capture our imagination is because human beings naturally seek endings. We want every story to have a conclusion. A final battle. A heroic sacrifice. A victorious return. The Ninth offers none of these. Instead, it simply vanishes from the historical record. That absence allows every generation to imagine its own ending. Was it overwhelmed by enemies beyond the frontier? Did disease destroy it far from home? Did political reforms erase its identity? Or does the answer still lie buried beneath an undiscovered Roman fort somewhere beneath the soil of Europe or the Middle East? The mystery invites us to keep searching. The Eagle of the Ninth. In 1954, British author Rosemary Sutcliffe published the novel The Eagle of the Ninth. The story imagined a young Roman officer traveling beyond Hadrian's Wall to recover the lost eagle of his father's legion. Although fictional, the novel became enormously influential. It introduced millions of readers to the mystery of Legio IX Hispana. Films, television series, documentaries, and countless articles followed. Over time, many people began believing the novel reflected established history. In reality, it was inspired by the mystery, not a solution to it. Still, its popularity ensured that the Ninth Legion would never be forgotten. A legacy greater than victory. Ironically, Legio IX Hispana may be remembered today more vividly than many legions whose complete histories are known. Other Roman legions fought bravely, won famous battles, served for centuries. Yet few inspire the same curiosity. The Ninth became legendary not because historians know everything about it, but because they do not. Sometimes mystery creates a stronger legacy than certainty. What the Ninth represents. The story of the Ninth Legion reminds us of something important about history. Even the Roman Empire, the greatest bureaucratic state of the ancient world, could not preserve every detail of its own past. Documents vanished. Buildings collapsed. Names faded. Time erased countless stories. If an entire Roman legion can disappear from the historical record, how many ordinary lives have been lost forever? How many untold stories still lie beneath fields, forests, deserts, and ancient ruins waiting to be discovered? History is not only a collection of answers. It is also a collection of questions. Final conclusion. For more than a century, the soldiers of Legio IX Hispana marched beneath Rome's eagle. They fought for Julius Caesar. They survived civil wars. They helped build an empire that stretched across 3 continents. They crossed rivers, climbed mountains, endured freezing winters, and faced enemies from Gaul to Britain. Then, the trail ended. Whether the Ninth Legion was destroyed in a forgotten battle, transferred to a distant frontier, quietly disbanded, or met some fate that history failed to record, one truth remains. Its disappearance became one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the Roman world. Perhaps one day archaeologists will uncover a forgotten inscription beneath an ancient fort. Perhaps a lost military archive still waits buried beneath the sands of the Middle East. Or perhaps the final chapter of the Ninth Legion has already been lost forever. And maybe that is exactly why its story continues to fascinate us. Because not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some exist to remind us that history is incomplete. That even the mightiest empire ever built could leave behind unanswered questions. As the centuries passed, Rome itself eventually disappeared. Its emperors became legends. Its temples became ruins. Its legions marched for the last time. Yet somewhere in the silence of history, the Ninth Legion still marches. Not across the frontiers of an empire, but through one of archaeology's greatest mysteries.